Yeah, just a quick review of the book, Becoming a Supple Leopard, the ultimate guide to resolving pain, preventing injury, and optimizing athletic performance. Sounds good to me. Basically, the book is divided up into 4 parts. I'll go over each one briefly just to give you an idea what's in the book. Part 1 is Principles and Theory. Basically, it's divided up into 6 chapters. Chapter 1 is Midline Stabilization and Organization. 2 is One Joint Rule. 3 is Laws of Torque. 4 is Body Archetypes and the Tunnel. 5 is movement hierarchy, and 6 is mobility and a systematic approach. So basically, in this part of the book explains basically the theoretical and the scientific background behind the principles that he's going to teach for body mechanics. Part 2 is categories of movements. This part gives you instructions on how best to approach a wide variety of exercises. And part 3 is mobilization techniques. Here it focuses on activity to improve mobility or heal injuries for different parts of the body. And part 4 is mobility prescriptions. So this section here basically describes what combination of mobilization techniques can be used for specific problem areas you might have or injuries, as well as programs just to improve general mobility. So yeah, if you have a lot of injuries, you have multiple injuries, from athletic performance or just from, a lot of mileage, just getting old, this would be a good resource, I think, to check out. You got to kind of have to sort through everything, but there's definitely a lot of information here for you. The other approach you can take is if you just have like one single injury, like say a back pain, you could go for a back pain book, or for instance, like if you have a rotator cuff tear, go for specifically another approach is go for books that just deal with one problem as well. So here again, books that treat multiple problems versus one problem. The only problem I have with books that treat multiple problems, like say you have a running book on running injuries, you're not going to have all those injuries. You're not going to have 5 or 6 different injuries from running, more than likely. More than likely, have 1 or 2. So there's a lot of the book that really you're not going to end up using. If you go for a book that's specific to a specific problem, you're going to get all you can out of the book. It's not really a waste. But anyway, this book here, if you have a torn rotator cuff or you have a rotator cuff, or you have a shoulder pain, this is a good book to do. You'd be surprised how many shoulder problems you can solve just by strengthening your rotator cuff alone. That's because the shoulder is a very shallow ball and socket joint and depends heavily on the rotator cuff or muscles for stability, unlike the hip that's a deep ball and socket joint. And it doesn't need as much muscles to really support it. Very briefly, this book had tons of pictures in it. If you're a visual learner, you'll like it. This chapter 1 basically goes over what the rotator cuff is, and what it does. It's made up of 4 muscles, a little rotator cuff cable a lot of people don't really know about. Part 2 is answers you need to know. Here goes over like what are the symptoms of a rotator cuff tear, any arm maneuvers you can do to see if you might have one, where does it tear at, goes over different kinds of tears. Here's a good one. I have a rotator cuff tear and I'm in a lot of pain. I need surgery, right? Well, not necessarily. So the book is very evidence-based. Each one of these is a study. He goes over in layman's terms, so there's no medical jargon here, really. Very easy to understand, definitely for the layperson. So to answer that question, you have a lot of pain, I got a tear, I have to have surgery, right? Well, not necessarily. So these studies, he digs up these studies where basically you take, say, 100 people with a rotator cuff tear, you measure the size of the tear, okay, and then you measure how much pain they're in, like you run a visual analog scale. And what they're finding is you can have people that really have huge rotator cuff tears, big tears that have no pain. Likewise, you can have people with small tears that are in a lot of pain. So the moral of the story is, you could have an asymptomatic rotator cuff tear, so you might go to surgery and to repair it, but really your problem is due to something else. So not necessarily. What will happen if I leave my rotator cuff tear alone? Here again, it looks up long-term follow-up studies of people, groups of people that have a torn rotator cuff that never get any treatment for it. Follow them for 5 or 10 years. What happens to it? Here's a good one. How does exercise compare to surgery when it comes to treating a torn rotator cuff? Good question. So the only way you can answer that is look at the randomized controlled trials. That's the highest form of proof in medicine that a treatment is actually effective. These would be where you take 100 people with a rotator cuff tear, 50 you randomly assigned to surgery, the other 50 you randomly assigned to a good exercise program. Then you follow them for like 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years. Really good follow-up studies. So who does better like in 5 years? The people that had the rotator cuff repaired with surgery or just did an exercise program? Make a long story short, you're going to basically end up at the same place, no matter what you do. Here again, they end the book with an exercise program. There's 3 different levels: a beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So really good. If you want to prevent a problem, so just an example of a book that treats one single problem. If you have multiple problems, this might be a better book for you because it can address a lot of different issues. So it just kind of depends. 2 different approaches, but yeah, great, good book. Check it out.